This is the third of our events this week, and it is actually a great pity that we've turned away about 50 or 60 people who could be accommodated if the room was larger. We always seem to get the balance wrong, but it shows the importance that people attach to the subject we're going to talk about tonight. So you're the lucky ones. You're the lucky ones. You're going to be. My name is David Ford. I'm chairperson of the Norwich Amnesty group. So on behalf of the group, can I welcome you all to the meeting, and thank you very much, of course, for your support. Before introducing Moazzam Begg, can I briefly explain what led us to invite him as a keynote speaker for this week? For 3 or 4 years, we've been taking part in an amnesty campaign called Terror, Security and Human Rights. This is an ongoing campaign. It's continuing now. We're still involved in it, and I know we and indeed Moazzam are going to speak about some of the people we're trying to help. In addition to campaigning on issues such as extreme rendition, the lack of human rights in Iraq as a result of the invasion, we focused our attention on the case of Binyam Mohammed, which perhaps many of you know. He was detained in Guantanamo Bay, but first, before we took on that case, we also took on for a brief period of time another detainee, Moazzam Begg, who was also detained in Guantanamo. We knew that in Binyam's case, the UK government wasn't actively seeking to secure his release. He wasn't charged, and as he was not a UK residents in this country. And we were one of many groups of all sorts throughout the country who began to campaign on his behalf. And in 2008, we were helped enormously by Lieutenant Colonel Yvonne Bradley, who was Binyam's US military attorney. And many of you might have seen her on television. She was very bravely, repeatedly spoke out in his defence, and we believe was very instrumental in seeking in getting his release. Binyam's story is a very complicated one, which we won't go into tonight. But in February this year, he was released without charge, and as you know, he has since then accused the UK security forces of being implicated in his torture. And only last week the case came to the headlines again, and no doubt over the coming months and perhaps years the results of this will roll on with whatever government is in power. And we're proud of the fact that in the Norwich group we were awarded an Amnesty Award for the campaigning work that took place. And this was led originally by Louise Reed, and then Neil McMurster took on the job of keeping us as a group all up to speed with everything and urging us to do it, and they're both in the audience tonight. So all this really was the catalyst for wanting to know more about the sort of things that happened in Guantanamo and the other Bagram and the other detention camps. And also to try and look forward and see how what the future holds, and try and bring all the horrors that have taken place and try and reap some benefit out of this horrific situation which has caused so many problems. And there is really no one better to do this than Moazzam Begg. He was born in Birmingham. He was arrested a few months after 9/11 in Pakistan. And for the next 3 years, he was detained in Kandahar, Bagram Air Base, and then Guantanamo Bay. He was released in 2005 without any explanation and without any apology on the part of the UK government. Since then, he has co-written a book entitled Enemy Combatant, and there are many copies outside I saw on the table. He is now director of a human rights organisation called Cage Prisoners, which he helped to establish to raise awareness of the plight of prisoners detained as part of the war on terror. And of course he will go into that in a moment. I looked on the cage prisoners website this morning, writing a few notes, and noticed that in the top left-hand corner, this is the 2,839th day of illegal detentions. Moazzam's talk is entitled The Dark Side. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I give you the Islamic greeting of peace. Assalamu alaikum. Before I begin, I just want to show you a little film that I made myself. I'm certainly no filmmaker, but I'd just like you to see this so that it has a flavour of what the sort of work Caged Prisoners does. So just bear with me for a second.
أخي صبرا على الانفراق إلى ما النوى الشوق باقي أخي صبرا على الانفراق إلى ما النوى الشوق باقي إذا فصلت جمادنا وبانا فروحي نحو روحك في أعناقي إذا فصلت جماجمنا وبانا فروحي نحو روحك في أعناقي يودعني أخي والدمع جاري ودمعي في المحاجر يودعني أخي والدمع جاري ودمعي في المحابر والمآقي بكى قلبي وما جفت دموعي بكاء بارع أقصى المراقي بكى قلبي وما جفت دموعي بكاء بارعا أقصى المراقي يجول بخاطر الآلام صوتي يردد في حناياه التلاقي يجول بخاطر الآلام صوتي يردد في حناياه التلاقي أراكم إخوتي وسط الليالي نجوما لا تمل بلا ائتلاقي أراكم إخوتي وسط الليالي نجوما لا تمل بلا ائتلاقي يقول
As you've just seen, the issues surrounding Guantanamo and the prisons that people have to go through before they ever get to Guantanamo are a very serious and a very present issue that is part of our world today. I often talk about what it's like to be in Guantanamo after you've gone through the process of being held in places that make Guantanamo look relatively tame. What you saw there, and I know some of the pictures were very graphic, include the first pictures of people like Omar Khadr, who David made reference to. there were children brought into Guantanamo at the age of 14, at the age of 12, and have grown into men in Guantanamo Bay. There were women, in some cases in Bagram, who were tortured so terribly that we believe that they have lost their mental faculties. There were men that were so old that they had hearing aids and that they had walking sticks, and because these aids that helped them could have been seen as a threat to the security of the guards, even these things were taken away from them. And so that's just the flavor of what Guantanamo and the secret detention process means. But let me just explain to you, just right from the beginning, where does this all begin from? It begins, of course, from September the 11th. Several planes crash into buildings in the United States of America. 2,976 people are killed. And remember that number because it's important. As a result of this, President Bush, under military and executive orders something called Operation Enduring Freedom. And remember that name too because it had significance. Under the name of Operation Enduring Freedom, a war is launched. Cruise missiles, phosphorus bombs, vacuum bombs, smart bombs, not so smart bombs, and a ground invasion of Afghanistan takes place. Underneath these bombs are many ordinary people. One of these people is Moazzam Begg. But also with Moazzam Begg is his wife and his 3 children. And under these bombs, he and his family evacuate because they have been living thus far in this country on a project to build a school for girls under Taliban-administered Afghanistan. And as they evacuate, amongst the things they see, amongst the carnage of war, they are thankfully, after all of that carnage, able to get through to a place where they are safe, or so they seem, so they believe. And then on the night of the 31st of January 2002, in Pakistan, in Islamabad, the capital city of that country, the country where Moazzam Begg's parents originate from, and where he has relatives, he has a knock on his door at midnight precisely. And he goes to answer the door. And when he opens the door, a gun is put to his head by unidentified individuals, all dressed as civilians. Nobody says a word. Nobody asks him who he is. Nobody says who they are. They push him into the forecourt of his house. They put him onto his knees. They bring electric stun guns in the background to scare him, to frighten him that if he moves he gets stunned, or worse. They shackle his hands behind his back and they shackle his legs. They put him in the prone position, and before they carry him off into darkness for the next 3 years, they put a hood over on his head, and then they go into the room where his wife and children are asleep. He doesn't know what becomes of them for the next several months. And he's carried off to a secret detention facility. Now let me just stop here, because what's happened thus far has been explained in the media and by intelligence services as extraordinary rendition. What does this mean? What does this term mean? When we think of a rendition, what do we think of a rendition of? A piece of classical music? A rendition of Beethoven's Fifth, maybe? It's not. Because if you look historically speaking, when people were rendered after they had escaped back to their masters, it was during slavery in the United States of America. And this again has great resonance, because the last time in history that people were taken across the Atlantic by the Americans to the Americas in chains was slavery. The next time it happened was the men who were taken from the dark continents to Guantanamo Bay. And so extraordinary rendition, the first part of it, as I said, is kidnap and abduction. And I often take issue at anybody who says or suggests that I was arrested, or that people in this war on terror were arrested. They were not. They were kidnapped and abducted. And why were they kidnapped and abducted? So that they could be held in the next stage of extraordinary rendition, which is false imprisonment, a crime under any law. And then, after false imprisonment, people are held in secret sites. And why are they held in secret? Because they can do then the next stage of extraordinary rendition. Torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment on top of that. When there is no accountability taking place, when there is no fear that anybody's watching what you're doing and that you will be held accountable for it, then you can pretty much do what you want. And that's why you have secret detention. So from this point onwards, Moazzam Begg is taken to a series of secret detention sites. The first one is in Pakistan. There he is interrogated by many people, the least of whom are the Pakistanis. The Pakistanis simply take him in because the money was good. President Bush offers bounties of millions of dollars, and President Musharraf of Pakistan willingly accepts it. Donald Rumsfeld makes an announcement in the world's media, saying that in southern Afghanistan and in Pakistan, we have leaflets dropping like snowflakes in December in Chicago, offering bounties of thousands of dollars to these very poor rural communities who couldn't earn $5,000 in 5 years. And as a result of this, hundreds of foreigners, primarily, in fact, exclusively Muslim, are handed over to the United States of America. Without any legal process, without any judicial process, without any extradition process, without any process. It's simply the process of the gun to your head, the shackles to your legs and your arms, and the hood over your head. But I, at this point, Moazzam Begg, start asking, what is it that I've done to you for which you're taking away my life and liberty, for which is what you're taking away my freedom to be with my family? What are you accusing me of? What have I done to you for which you're doing this to me? And I'm told, in this car, before I'm taken away to the secret detention sites, with my hands tied behind my back, with the shackles on my legs and the hood, somebody lifts the hood over my head and said, and produces a pair of handcuffs. And he says that these handcuffs were given to him by one of the wives of the September 11 victims to go and capture the perpetrators. So I understood that I am dealing with people that I have no ability to counter. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this. Because I have the might of the world's greatest superpower pitted against me, one individual. And I have nobody to back me. And as time goes on, I realize that my own government, that intelligence services from my own country, based on a dossier that they have built over a period of time because of my visits to Bosnia during the 90s, have said that this person is an intelligence threat, a security threat. They never told it to me, they told it to the Americans. And the Americans then decide that we can be justified in holding this man. And so it continues. And so I'm taken to the Kandahar detention facility. And at this point you can imagine that the Pakistanis you would expect, as a third world country that is known for human rights abuses, you would expect some abuse. You would expect a few slaps and punches and kicks. You'd expect to be brutalized a little bit. But they were very apologetic. They said, sorry son, this isn't our call. This is the United States of America doing this. We have been told that if we do not cooperate, they will strike us so hard we will not be able to recover. And I say to them, can you just tell me this, or show me this, that my family will be okay. I said, we can't do that. It's not our job. I was then taken to Kandahar. And Kandahar at this point was a detention facility built by the US Marines, a very temporary, makeshift US detention facility. And there, the processing, the shock and awe is designed to terrify. This is called the war on terror. But from this point onwards, for me, it is the war of terror. It is designed to terrify. And the way in which that happens is that you're dragged across the floor in the mud. with soldiers sitting on top of you, one on your head and one in the small of your back, with a knee in it, tearing off your clothes with a knife, so close to your skin that when it glides you can feel the cold blade of that steel, removing your clothing. And then soldiers gather around you, and they bring their dogs. The dogs are so close to you that you can feel the saliva falling off of their tongues. You are shaved. If you have facial hair or if you have hair on your head, it doesn't really matter, it's all gone. Just like a sheep. And if you were to look at yourself in the mirror, you wouldn't know who you were. You wouldn't be able to recognize yourself. And they do this not only to you, but they do this to many people. Old men, young boys, disabled people. And you see grown men in some cases who had fought the Soviet Union. Men who are brave, men who are villagers, men who live on very little, break down into tears because somebody shaved off their beard. Something that for him as an Afghan Muslim man was sacred to him. And it goes. And with it is his dignity. And the men there fight to keep their dignity, but they don't know how when they are stripped naked. And they are searched in bodily ways that I can't even describe to you. And then they're held and interrogated, and I'm held and I'm interrogated, and the people that interrogate me are people from the United States military, from the FBI, from the CIA, but also, more disturbingly for me, British intelligence, the MI5. And they continue to return over the weeks, months, and years over a period, with one hand saying that we're here for your interests, on the other saying that there is nothing we can do to help you, we are not social workers. And there it is. For me, that period then moves over, as I said, weeks and months and years. It includes being transferred to the Bagram detention facility where I'm held for about 11 months. And Bagram is still open, as indeed is Guantanamo. But at least there's been an order to close Guantanamo. Bagram has increased its number of prisoners since the war, since President Obama took power. And Bagram is this place where you see people, where I see people beaten to death. Where, if you get to see this film, which is outside, and I hope that some of you have heard of it, called Taxi to the Dark Side. This film won the Oscar for Best Documentary last year. And primarily that's because I'm in it. It discusses around the case of a taxi driver who is murdered, beaten to death, where I see it, and discusses the entire war on terror, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and it discusses the rules, or lack of rules, that are applied in detainee treatment, and how it was possible for this individual to be killed. But of course, what you learn from watching this film is that he's not just an individual. It's not just one individual that gets killed. There are several. I witnessed 2 of them. But between Bagram, between Abu Ghraib and some of the other places, there are well over 100. And what's even more disturbing is that in most of the cases, the people are found to be innocent of any wrongdoing, even by the US military standards. And why does this happen? What is it that creates this atmosphere, this environment where people can do such things to other people? There's this tenet that exists. I know it exists within Christianity, I know it exists within Islam, and I know it exists generally amongst ordinary people. Very moral tenet. That is to treat people the way you would wish to be treated. It's part of the military code too. It's part of the military code that you treat people the way you would wish to be treated. It's even in the Geneva Conventions. And yet, who would like to be described as an alien? I know we describe people as aliens within our own society, our free society. We say certain people are aliens, foreign, different. But if you add to that the description of enemy alien, which is how we were called, or enemy combatants, then it adds a new flavor, because what it says is that this person is a new category in the history of mankind. In the entire history of mankind, we have now developed a new category. And this is an enemy combatant. He is not a prisoner of war, because that means certain rights. He is not a civilian, because that means he needs to be let go. And he is not a non-combatant. He is an enemy alien, or an enemy combatant. And that means that this person is the other. He is foreign. His religion is different. His faith is different. His color is different. His language is different. He is different. In fact, he's so different that he's alien. And we make films in this country and elsewhere in the United States about aliens. In fact, when the alien comes up against another alien, a predator, the alien's a bad guy. So you can see that the description, the usage of terminology is very important. Because the other one that I mentioned to you that is important was Operation Enduring Freedom. And after the process of being held in Bagram and seeing these things taking place and much more, I am eventually sent to Guantanamo Bay, where after seeing the deaths of people, after hearing the screams of women that I'm led to believe is my wife being tortured next door, after being shown pictures of my family and my children that I'm told, that I'm asked, where do you think they are? What do you think happened to them the night that we took you? Do you think you will see them again? After all of this, I look forward to going to Guantanamo. I'm positively looking forward to going to the world's most notorious prison, the world's most infamous prison that everybody talks about. It's not the world's worst, by any means, but it's the most well-known. And what do I see when I go there? One of the things I see is outside every camp, every detention camp that's being built, whether it's Camp Delta, the place that you see, Camp X-Ray, where you see the signature pictures of Guantanamo, the ones that remain in people's mind indelibly, of men kneeling in orange suits with face masks and earmuffs and blackened out goggles, looking like the extraterrestrial aliens that the world has told you, that the United States of America has told you that these men are, the subhumans that we've been told that these men are, the worst of the worst, as President Bush says. So whether it's outside Camp X-Ray, or Camp Delta, or Camp 5, 6, or 7, or Camp Echo, where I am held for 2 years in solitary confinement, in isolation from all other prisoners, or Camp Iguana, which is where the children of Guantanamo are held. People like Omar Khadr, who you saw in this film, which was the most disturbing picture of all, with his young body filled with shrapnel wounds and his eye shot out. All of them are put into Camp Iguana and remain there until they are no longer children. Or whichever it is, each one has a plaque outside of it, which says, honor bound to defend freedom. Freedom, remember the word. As if freedom is something that you can have a monopoly on. And remember Operation Enduring Freedom. Indeed, if that is freedom, then it is one that we endured. Because there's no other way to describe that sort of freedom. You have to endure it. You don't enjoy it. And freedom is something we're supposed to enjoy. Guantanamo for me at the time meant being in a cell that measured 8 foot by 6 foot, and remaining there for 2 years. And then if you want to take a walk in Guantanamo in your cell, it means you walk 3 steps forward, 3 steps back, and you continue to do that for minutes, for hours, days, weeks, and months, and years. That's how you will take a walk in Guantanamo Bay. And if you think that you will be subjected to any legal process, then think again. If you think that you will be given an explanation of what it is that you're supposed to be here for, then think again. I count myself lucky in many ways because I'm an English speaker. I'm multilingual, I speak Urdu and Arabic. I understand many different people and their cultures. But sadly, the people that are guarding you do not. And within ignorance, of course, lies hatred. Ignorance breeds hatred. And the hatred that I see in front of me happens greatly as a result of ignorance. And one example I can give you. You imagine a soldier tells a prisoner to get to the back of the cell, but the prisoner speaks one of the myriad languages that exist in Guantanamo or elsewhere. They speak Turkish and Farsi and Uyghur and Chinese and Swahili and Arabic and all of these above. But they don't. But some of them don't speak English. I'd say probably most of them do now, and with strange and weird and wonderful American accents too. But when the soldier finds that the detainee does not respond to what his orders are, he raises his voice a few decibels louder. His face gets red. He starts getting angry. His eyes start to bulge. And he thinks somehow, by doing this, that the detainee, the prisoner, is going to understand him any better. But he doesn't. He just gets more angry. And that, again, there's a direct example of what ignorance breeds hatred. Anger and hatred. The process of being held in a place like Guantanamo, I think, for most people, should be very clearly an unjust one. I think most people would accept that. I think it's very difficult to find anyone today who will argue the case for Guantanamo. It has become the ultimate symbol of injustice around the world. But if you remember the case of the Titanic, the ship, this great ship that was destroyed in the Atlantic Ocean, it wasn't the tip that took it down. It was what lay beneath. It was the part that you couldn't see. It was the hidden part. And that is, as I see it, what the role of the secret detention sites is. Guantanamo is the visible part of the war on terror, or the visible part of the detentions process, the final destination. But you have to go through extraordinary rendition. You have to go through the secret detention sites, which still exist. And even more, even though President Obama said he will close down the secret sites and stop torture, what he didn't say, you should have taken note of. And that is, what did he say about proxy detention? What does that mean? That simply means using another country that is known for human rights abuses, who has been pointed out by the West as a country where torture exists, where in some cases there aren't even decent relations between the West and these countries. All of a sudden they become our friends. Syria and Libya in particular. Libya in particular, particularly to us here in the UK, should be of concern. Why? There's one thing that I want you all to remember if you've forgotten anything that I say, and I know I've said a lot to you, is the case of a man called Ibn al-Shaykh al-Libi. Could you please raise your hands if you've ever heard this name before? Ibn al-Shaykh al-Libi. Shaykh al-Libi. Ali al-Fakhri. There's lots of names for him, but Shaykh al-Libi. Never heard of this name. Okay. Well, I think you should have heard of this name, because based upon what happened to this person, we went to war in Iraq. When I was held in the Bagram detention facility, the CIA came to me and they said that if you do not cooperate with us, you will be going to Egypt. And this is what we did to Ibn al-Shaykh al-Libi. And Ibn al-Shaykh al-Libi at the time was supposed to be the most senior ranking member of Al-Qaeda captured to date. And they sent him to Egypt, and in Egypt he was tortured. And I know that Amnesty produced a fantastic film called The Stuff of Life, about waterboarding. So if you want to know what happened to Ibn al-Shaykh al-Libi, take a look at that, and there are some leaflets outside about this. It is an induced feeling of drowning, even though your body's not submerged. And Ibn al-Shaykh al-Libi, under this waterboarding, confessed that he, as a member of Al-Qaeda, was working with Saddam Hussein to obtain weapons of mass destruction. In 2003, I didn't know this at the time, I was a bit tied up. Glad to see you've got a sense of humor. Colin Powell in 2003 went to the UN Security Council, and the rest is history. He argued for a case of war in Iraq, and he said that we have credible information from a man who is in our custody that Al-Qaeda was going to use chemical and biological weapons to attack the United States of America. And that, coupled with the dodgy dossier and other concocted evidence, was used as a justification. Now here's the interesting part. A senior, the most senior ranking member of Al-Qaeda that has been announced at that point, surely, he should have gone to Guantanamo, right? Would have made sense. Everybody is supposed to be there as an alleged member of Al-Qaeda. But he doesn't go to Guantanamo. He never goes to Guantanamo. He goes to a series of secret detention sites. He's moved in a box. When I say a box, I mean a coffin, while he's alive. They drill a few holes into this coffin so that he can breathe, because he's such a dangerous man. It's strange because somebody like Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, I know you know this name, right? Could you raise your hand if you know this name? Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is supposed to be the mastermind, the man who planned the September 11th attacks. He's sent to Guantanamo in 2007 after being held in secret detention sites, and he too is waterboarded. But Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi is not sent to Guantanamo. Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi is a Libyan dissident. He has problems with certain places, and one of those main places is Libya. He's not wanted in the West for anything. And where do they return him to? Of all countries? Yes, Libya. They're returning to Libya. And in Libya, he's held in a secret detention prison in the middle of the Libyan Sahara Desert. And earlier this year, what happens to Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi? He dies in his prison cell. Allegedly committing suicide. And his picture was also in the film that I made. So why does this happen? Why does he get sent to Libya? What's the reason for it? I'll leave it to your imagination. But to me it's clear. In Guantanamo in 2004, a Supreme Court decision was passed, which allowed lawyers to come to Guantanamo to advocate on behalf of their clients. And amongst those people, for me, was a man called Clive Stafford Smith, who I know some of you have heard of and heard from. And he was the first lawyer to visit me for him. And people like him would have been assigned to people like Ibn al-Sheikh. And I know Clive Stafford Smith, he doesn't fight all of his cases in the court of law, because the law does not apply in Guantanamo. He fights his cases in the court of public opinion, and can you imagine what would have happened had he told the world and reminded the world about the case of Ibn al-Sheikh al-Libi and why we went to war in Iraq. That's how serious this is. But not to dwell on all the bad parts, because I think it's important to see the future, to see what is it that we can gain from any of this. For me, I was just looking at my iPhone. Does anybody have an iPhone here?
Yeah, it won't work.
All right, okay. Well, in Norwich, you mean?
No, down in the cells.
Okay, okay. I just saw an email on my iPhone, which has come from a soldier, one of my guard's women in Guantanamo. And that just kind of reminded me of what this experience has done. I am, as was mentioned earlier on, the director of an organisation called Caged Prisoners that campaigns for people detained without charge or trial. It is constituted of several former Guantanamo prisoners as well as other ordinary people. And part of my work since my return, other than trying to readjust to the family that I hadn't seen for 3 years, including a son that I had never seen, who was born while I was still in detention. On top of that, I am trying to maintain this link between former prisoners and to do something about their welfare also after they return, because we are not given any counselling, we are not given any support from at any government mental level. We have only support from individuals and organisations that do that. But in this country, we're pretty more privileged than others in places like Yemen and Iraq and Mauritania and Chad and the other plethora of countries where people have returned to. But also, the people I've been in touch with are former guardsmen and interrogators. People who in some cases were charged with war crimes. And one in particular, who features in this film, Taxi to the Dark Side, which I urge you all to buy from the store. This interrogator was brought up for crimes committed in Bagram, as well as the place where he was deployed to after that, which is Abu Ghraib, that infamous prison in Iraq. And bizarrely, he had done some terrible things, evidently. But to me, he didn't do anything wrong at all. In fact, this is what demonstrates to me the nuance of difference in all sorts of people. It's never always black and white. There's plenty of grey area in the middle. And this person, his lawyers contacted me and asked me, because they felt that I had nothing against him, because he'd never done anything to me individually, would I be willing to be a character witness for this guy? A character witness for somebody who's being brought up for charges of war crimes. And I didn't agree to do that, but I wrote a piece in one of the newspapers, an op-ed piece, and explained that whilst he can't escape culpability, who created that environment where what he did as a low-ranking soldier became totally justified? Who went to the world and said that these people are the worst of the worst? Who went to the world in front of everyone before there was ever a trial and said that these people, I don't know what they have done, as Bush said in public. I don't know what these folk have done, but I know they're bad men. How could you know that? Intuition, I suppose. And this person, eventually I spoke to him. I picked up the phone and spoke to him because I wanted him. I learned that he had joined the Veterans Against the War movement, that he was now no longer part of the military. I wanted him to be a witness in the case of that young boy who you saw terribly wounded. Would you be willing to go to Guantanamo and tell them what you did to him? And he said, I'm already there. I'm already trying to make amends for what I've done wrong. And then he began to weep down the phone, crying. And I can tell you, it's one of the hardest phone calls I've ever had to make. And there have been others who were conscious, who had a conscience even before they came to Guantanamo. They realized very early on that what they were doing was totally immoral. At the beginning of this year, I toured with one of those American soldiers around the United Kingdom in a tour called Two Sides, One Story. We went to almost every major city in the United Kingdom, so that obviously counts out Norwich. And we managed to get an amazing reception everywhere we went. Jailer and jail talking about how to stretch our hands across the pond to one another. This doesn't mean that we forgive what the Bush administration has done. In fact, we take them on in their own words. We campaign for the people that are still held there. We call for accountability and we call for justice. But what it does mean is that we recognize that everybody's not the same. That you can't turn around and say that because these people did this, therefore they are all the same. And we, as Muslims, do not reciprocate ignorance. We do not let our oppressor become our teacher. And this is the lesson that we learn and the lesson that we teach. So I hope finally that the future is bright. For purely personal reasons, I hope that it's not orange. You remember the adverts? And that, joking aside, the most powerful man in the world entered his presidency, began his presidency, by saying that he will close down the world's most notorious prison. He recognized it. He recognized it for what it was. Nonetheless, he has a very short time in which to close it. About 2.5 months, 3 months. Then what is he going to do? And the thing that I would ask of all of you is that even if he closes it down, in the words of a great American civil rights activist, Malcolm X, he said, you don't take a knife, stick it in a man's back 9 inches deep, pull it back an inch and say, haven't we made progress? That's what Guantanamo is. When somebody says he's closing down Guantanamo and wants accolades for it, remember, it was illegal to begin with. It was wrong to begin with. It was immoral and duplicitous to begin with. But what you have to ask is that thank you for doing so. What are you doing about secret detention? What are you doing about proxy detention? What are you doing about those detention sites where you can easily send the CIA or other alphabet agencies to sit in a dark corner, to hand out or whisper into the ears of the interrogator and torturer, ask him this question, and then go and sit back into that dark corner where nobody sees you? What are you doing about that? That's the questions I hope you all ask to people that need to be held accountable. Thank you.